Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, plain and simple, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in Isaiah, and um, of course, as we're in this section of the New Old Testament, the writings of the prophets, and so we're in Isaiah, who, of course, is one of the major prophets. And although I don't think God makes the distinction of major and minor prophets. But I do, and so I kind of push back on it. However, as I'm reading through, I can see why the designations are earned. And we're going to even see later that God himself um, honors these men, that his vessels that he's chosen. Um, not greatness from the standpoint or major because they're more, but you could probably say that major because of the revelation. For example, with Isaiah, there's a vast amount of revelation, a prophetic revelation that was given to him, revealed to him, and then of course he spoke it out. So right now we're remember and this is important sort of for the timeline, that we're about 100 years before the Babylonian exile. As we get into chapter 8, let me put up my screen here. So as you can see, we're going to be right here in this area where it says the Assyrian captivity. And so there's going to be a prophecy in chapter 8 about this captivity here. So as you can see, there are two major prophetic events concerning Israel. The writings of the prophet, and remember we began this, we started our journey not according to how our Bibles have arranged the writings of the prophet. They arranged them according to minor and major. So I said I started from a timeline. And the reason why I did that again is because of the prophetic voice, as we can keep in tune with the prophetic voice. So as you can see here, that this timeline here is about 80 years before the Babylonian captivity. So when we talk about the northern kingdoms here, as we can see it with this chart, the kings of Judah versus the kings of Israel. And so as you can see, the northern kingdoms fell first, and so they were kind of out of their land for quite a few times before we get to Babylon. And then when we get to the Babylonian captivity, there's a 70-year prophecy before they return. And so interesting enough, when they return, there's no northern southern kingdom. They are one kingdom again. So let's go to chapter 8. Isaiah chapter 8. Then it says, Then the Lord said to me, Take a large piece of parchment and write on it with an ordinary pen. Now, the pen, what he's talking about, is a lot different. We remember this is a English translation, And so they're using words that will fit, or you could say writing instrument. You know, if they said writing instrument, that would be just accurate, because that's really what it was. They did not use pens like we think of an ink pen. The ink, even though sometimes we see the word ink, the word parchment was a dried out plant, and then so they would take like soot or smudge and keep mixing it, with into it, and it was black, but it was smudge. It wasn't ink the way we think about it. So the writing materials in which they was available at the time was very flimsy. That's why we have copies of copies of copies, especially when we come to the New Testament. So the writings of the prophets, God did preserve the revelation, the prophecies through um, um, he has preserved it, but oftentimes you could understand why when we say sometimes we don't have the original writings, because like this parchment it was easily corrupted. It would wither and deteriorate. So he says, take a large piece of parchment and write on it with an ordinary pen, Mahari Shalahajbaz, and I don't know if I pronounced that right, but that name is going to be interesting. He says, I've appointed trustworthy witnesses, Uriah the priest and Zechariah the son of Jaber, uh, Jabi Rachiah. I hope I pronounced that right. Now, the reason why this is important too, so as you know, different names are very common. So Zechariah was a common name. So this is not the prophet Zechariah that we have in terms of the writings. He had a different last name. Look at verse 3. Now he says, I was then intimate with the prophetess, and she conceived and gave birth to a son. Now let's stop for a moment, because there's two things we can't let this go by. One, in other words, he said he got busy with the prophetess, meaning his wife. But I also want you to know that his wife was a prophetess. Now, I want to say something about this because I think it's important. When he says, I was intimate with the prophetess, and she conceived and gave birth to a son, he says, and the Lord said to me, name him Mahar Shalahashbaz. Okay. And so that's the name of the son. Um, and Isaiah said he was intimate with the prophetess, so this is not a virgin birth. Okay. um, but so just interesting note that he gave us the information. I don't know if you can call it TMI, but he says I got busy with my wife, in other words. But notice he calls her a prophetess, though. Now we don't. I think other than this kind of reference here, we don't have any kind of information on Isaiah's wife. We don't have any prophecies. In other words, the fact that she's called a prophetess, meaning that she prophesied, we just don't have the writings or any prophecies that she spoke. Remember, when we talk about prophecy, keep this in mind. So prophecy is spoken revelation. It's spoken revelation or spoken inspiration. So prophecy shouldn't be confused with the revelation. Now, revelation is God revealing, God giving us information. We could not ever get this information unless God revealed it. We couldn't. There are things that unless God tell us. So you could not by investigation arrive at that. And when you think about the spiritual aspect of man, meaning his being dead in sins, keep this in mind that the arrogancy of man today, the sinful man today, forgets that we've only been in this age of knowledge explosion for what? Just short over 100 years. And when we talk about the technological explosion, remember, even less time than that. So think about it. Just in my lifetime, my adult lifetime, where we have iPhones. And this iPhone, of course, or any kind of these phones that can put us, I'm literally carrying the world around with me with this, right? Um, I no longer, now I have a dictionary. I bought this years ago, okay? Up there, there's a whole lot of, not a lot of books, but books, dictionaries, things like that. But I can easily access that with just this phone right here. Now, keep this in mind, that only happened within the last, 25 years? Not even that, right? For the phone. Computers, the access for everybody within the last 20 years, okay? Um, the information, boom, right, within under 100 years. So in other words, you have the entire history of man, and just within the last 100 to 150 years, where you see this giant leap, right, in terms of information. Now, I say that because um, while the world would deny this, while the world would shun this knowledge or shun this, man could never have gotten there on his own, because we had been going around for thousands of years. Remember, we didn't even have running access to or running water, plumbing. Again, remember, all of these technologies within the just last 100 to 150 years. And some of us, even still today, as crazy it may seem, there are people today that still live without some of these amenities, right, that we enjoy. My grandmother, I'm thinking about my grandmother at some point before my birth had an outhouse. We used to see it. Strange enough, we never played in the outhouse. We looked in it, but just wasn't something, once, because the outhouse, if you ever see one, yeah. But this technology, so my point is, God has to give revelation. God gives revelation. Now that man, of course, has been enlightened, yeah, they've grown in it, they've perfected. Now we're in the, what they call it, AI stage, okay? Where, the technology, the computer technology and all that it's growing. But it still cannot predict. There's certain things that are beyond the scope of man's capability of knowing. And you can only know that if God gives the revelation. So prophecy itself is just spoken utterance. The revelation is what, when we look at this prophecy here, and I'll get to this in a moment because I'm making a point here. And as I told you before, with Isaiah, I am going to take my time a little bit with Isaiah. It's a long book, but there's so much. It's so much revelation in this book that's why I will take my time through it. And as we study the prophecies, I think it's important to understand some of the information, the knowledge, the principles of this. Now, and I'll get back to this because I'm going to come back to the fact that Isaiah's wife herself was a prophetess. Okay, but I'll get back to that but my point is in terms of prophecy. Okay, prophecy, or so the prophecy itself is utterance. So in other words, at some point, this was spoken by Isaiah and then also written down. Now, you could have a revelation that God gives you if God decrees, if God chooses to reveal something to you. So, for example, all of these prophecies that we're going to study, I'm going to jump ahead for just one moment. I'm going to skip down. We'll come back and study this later, but let me see. Here's a good one. So look at this one, and this is, I'm skipping down to chapter 9, verse 2. It says, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. A light has dawned, and those living in the land of darkness, you have enlarged the nation and increased his joy. Now, the reason why I want to show that is in Matthew chapter 4, I'm jumping ahead. I just want to show you because I'm talking about the prophecy or the idea of prophecy. So here's fulfilled prophecy. So it says, verse 12, now when he had heard, talking about Jesus, that John had been arrested, he withdrew into Galilee, and leaving Nazareth, where he had lived, in Capernaum by the sea, in the territory of Nubilan and Naphtali, so that it was spoken by, get this, by the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. I'm sorry, so that what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilees of the Gentiles, the people dwelling in darkness have seen a great light. For those dwelling in the region of the shadow of death, on them light is dawned. Now we'll come back to this, but I want you to see. So right here, watch this. This is prophecy. So there's a couple of things I want to kind of rehash. Again, I think it's important. So here's the prophecy spoken, remember, over 800 years, right? Over 800 years before this event happened. Here is Isaiah by revelation. God gives him the revelation. He speaks this. Okay. So nevertheless, look at just nevertheless, the gloom and distress in the land will not be like the former times when he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. So again, this is a prophecy when Jesus of Jesus walking the land. Okay, so this is revelation. You could not ever obtain this by human means. God has to give this revelation, and then the prophet speaks it out. Okay, that's why it's important that we. And I know I'm frustrated because these false prophets today, that people who pretend to be prophets in the name of the Lord, they put a title. Now they're doing it just for title, but you cheapen, you lessen the importance of prophecy, of true biblical prophecy. That's the problem with these guys who call themselves prophets. Okay, so a true prophet, remember, we receive the revelation from God. Okay, they will receive the revelation from God. And so what makes it prophecy is that it is spoken out. So let's say like this: if they never spoke, they could have just the revelation itself. Now, some people may call it the word of wisdom and word of knowledge. Okay, but in its overall umbrella, we could say it's just simply revelation from God. God is revealing something. So it's very possible that you can have a revelation through a dream, vision, or whatever, and you never speak it out. If you never speak it out, then it's not prophecy. What makes it prophecy is when it is spoken out. Okay. All right. So we'll pick this up in the next study. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. I'll see you in the next study.